My name is Michelle Lawson. I'm 63 years old, and just 3 weeks after my husband's funeral, my own children told me to pack my bags because they were selling my house. They didn't know I was the one who was about to pack a bag for a one-way flight to Spain. It's a long story, so grab a cup of coffee or a glass of tea. I'd love to know where you're all listening from today. What time is it where you are? Please let me know in the comments below. It makes me feel like we're all sitting in the same room together, sharing a piece of our lives. The silence in the house was a physical thing. For 41 years, these walls had absorbed the soundtrack of a family, the thud of a basketball in the driveway, the high-pitched squeals of toddlers turning into the moody bass of teenagers, the constant comforting drone of the evening news that Russell insisted on watching. Now, the only sound was the mournful hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen, a sound I'd never noticed before, and the frantic bird-like flutter of my own heart in my chest. It had been 21 days since we laid Russell to rest, and the grief I felt was no longer a sharp, stabbing pain, but a thick, suffocating blanket I couldn't seem to throw off. I was curled up in Russell's favorite armchair, a hulking leather beast that was worn smooth in all the places he used to sit. It still smelled faintly of his Old Spice aftershave and the pipe tobacco he'd given up years ago, but that had somehow seeped into the very fabric of the furniture. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure his presence, his calming voice. It was in that moment of quiet desperation that the phone rang, its shrill cry slicing through the stillness. I fumbled for it on the side table, squinting at the screen. The caller ID showed Donald's face, a photo from a family trip to the Grand Canyon 5 years back. He was grinning, his arms slung around his wife, Lisa. A brief, foolish flicker of warmth went through me. It was the first time he'd called me all week. Maybe he was finally calling just to check in, to ask how his mother was holding up in the echoing silence of her life. I cleared the lump from my throat. "Hello, dear." "Mom?" His voice was clipped, efficient, the one he used for business calls. There was no warmth, no preamble, no, "How are you feeling?" Just an immediate jarring dive into logistics. "Listen, I need you to start packing." I blinked, the words not quite registering. They seemed to belong to a different conversation. "Packing?" I asked, my voice a weak echo of its usual self. "Packing for what, Donald?" "The house," he said, his tone laced with impatience that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. "Lisa found a buyer, her cousin Jim. He's a developer. He's ready to make a cash offer, a good one, but we need to move fast. He wants to close by the end of next month." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The floral pattern on the wallpaper swam before my eyes. I gripped the worn arms of the chair, my knuckles turning a bloodless white. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "Sell the house? Donald, this is my home. This is where you grew up." "It was your home, Mom." He corrected me, the subtle change in tense landing like a slap. "You can't afford to keep it. We've been over this." We had not been over this, not once. In the flurry of arrangements after the funeral, he and Darlene had exchanged worried glances and muttered about finances and upkeep, but never, not once, had they spoken to me directly about selling my home. "You'll move into Darlene's basement," he continued, dictating the terms of my surrender as if he were a general and I was a conquered nation. "It's already clearing it out. It's got its own bathroom. It's the best solution for everyone." The best solution? To be demoted from the mistress of my own home to a tenant in my daughter's basement. To have my life, 40 years of it, packed into boxes and stored away to make room for their convenience. The sheer audacity of it, the cold-blooded calculus stole the air from my lungs. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. "Mom, are you there?" His voice was sharp with annoyance now. "Just start with the upstairs closets and the attic. We'll be over this weekend to help you sort through the junk." And then he hung up. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone's monotonous hum. A new kind of cold, a dread far deeper and more chilling than grief, seeped into my marrow. This wasn't a spontaneous, poorly thought out idea. This was a coup, a meticulously planned, quietly executed coup, and they had been plotting it while I was still numbly picking out a casket for their father. My gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. It was from our 35th anniversary. Russell had his arm wrapped tightly around me, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and that way they always did when he was truly happy. He had always been the planner, the one who looked ahead. He saw the world in terms of cause and effect, of potential risks and necessary precautions. A few years ago, when the doctor's reports started getting more serious, he sat me down in this very room. He had taken both my hands in his grip surprisingly firm for a man whose strength was beginning to wane. "Michelle," he said, his voice raspy but clear, "we need to talk about what happens when I'm not here." He had held up a hand to stop my protests. "No, listen, you have to be strong. You are strong. But they'll try to make you feel like you're not." "They?" I asked, confused. "The kids," he said with a heavy sigh. "I love them more than life itself, you know that. But they're different from us. They see things in terms of what's easy, what's immediate. Donald's business, that constant need for a bigger salary, a bigger title. He's always chasing the next promotion instead of building something solid. And Darlene with her husband and their spending, they live on a mountain of credit card debt. They'll see you, this house, our savings, as a safety net. Or worse, a solution." He squeezed my hands. "Promise me something, Shelley. Promise me you'll always live for yourself first. You've given them everything. When I'm gone, it's your turn." At the time, I'd cried and told him not to talk like that. I'd believed his fears were a product of his illness, a morbid turn of mind. Our children, our loving children, would never, they couldn't possibly. But now his words echoed in the crushing silence of the house, a prophecy chillingly fulfilled. He had seen it all. He had known. The next day, as promised, they arrived. They didn't come bearing casseroles or flowers. They came armed with clipboards, measuring tapes, and an air of grim efficiency. Darlene, my only daughter, swept into the living room, her eyes scanning the furniture, not with the fond gaze of memory, but with the cold, calculating appraisal of an estate agent.
"Mom, we need to be realistic," she said, her voice dripping with a cloying, manufactured sympathy that set my teeth on edge. She thrust a sheaf of papers into my hand. It was a budget she and Donald had printed from the internet, a complete work of fiction. It showed Russell's pension as a pittance, conveniently ignoring the additional income from our investment portfolio. It listed the house's expenses, property taxes, insurance, routine maintenance, as an insurmountable mountain of debt, inflating every figure to a comical degree. "You see?" she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the dramatic negative balance she had highlighted in yellow at the bottom of the page. "You'll be out of money in 6 months. We're doing this to protect you, Mom, to keep you from losing everything." Donald, standing behind her like a silent, hulking bodyguard, nodded in solemn agreement, his eyes fixed on a point on the wall just over my head. He couldn't even look at me. I stared down at the budget. It was a masterpiece of deceit. They had underestimated my income by more than half and doubled the cost of every conceivable expense. They were building a cage of lies around me, brick by brick, and trying to convince me it was a fortress built for my own protection. And in that precise moment, something inside me shifted. The soft, pliable grief, the paralyzing shock, it didn't vanish, but it was compressed under the immense pressure of their betrayal. It hardened, crystallized into something sharp, clear, and unbreakable. Resolve. Russell had told me to be strong. He had told me to live for myself. And I knew, with a certainty that calmed my racing heart, that he hadn't just left me with words of warning. He had left me with ammunition. We had built our financial life together, side by side, for over 40 years. I wasn't some clueless housewife who didn't know how to pay a bill. I was the one who managed our portfolio, who spoke with our financial advisor every quarter, who had tracked every single stock and mutual fund. They had conveniently forgotten that. They saw a grieving, helpless widow. They were about to be forcefully reminded of who I truly was. I looked up from the fraudulent papers, letting my face crumple into the perfect mask of confusion and fear. I summoned a tear, letting it trace a path down my cheek. I made my voice tremble. Oh my, I I had no idea it was so bad. You're right. You're absolutely right. What would I ever do without you two? Darlene's face, which had been tight with tension, softened with smug satisfaction. The victory was hers. She patted my hand, a gesture of condescending comfort. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mom," she said, her voice now full of magnanimous warmth. "I'll take care of everything from here on out." I looked from her face to my son's, my own flesh and blood, the two lives Russell and I had created and nurtured. "Of course you will, dear," I said, my voice choked with unspoken meaning. "Of course you will." The game, I thought, had officially begun. They believed they were the players, confidently moving their pieces across the board. They had no idea that I was the one controlling the game, and I was about to flip the entire table over. For the next 10 days, I gave the performance of a lifetime. I was Ophelia, I was Blanche Dubois, I was every fragile, broken woman ever written. I transformed myself into the character my children had created for me, the helpless, grieving widow, utterly lost in a world of finances and decisions she couldn't possibly comprehend. It was a role I despised, but it was a necessary camouflage. When Donald came over on Saturday, armed with a stack of flattened moving boxes and a roll of packing tape, I followed him from room to room like a lost ghost. I'd pick up a small porcelain bird from a bookshelf and ask, my voice wavering, "Do you think there will be room for this in the basement? It was a gift from your father." He would let out a long, put-upon sigh, the sound of a man burdened by a difficult but necessary duty. "Probably not, Mom. We need to be practical. Just pack the absolute essentials. Photos, important papers. The rest is just stuff." Just stuff. 40 years of a shared life reduced to stuff? I would nod meekly, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek, while my mind was a whirlwind of cold, hard calculation. Every seemingly naive question I asked, every moment of feigned helplessness, was a carefully deployed tool. I was gathering intelligence, and more importantly, I was inflating their egos, lulling them into a state of supreme, unassailable overconfidence. They saw exactly what they wanted to see. A problem that was quietly solving itself, a mother who would fold neatly into their prearranged plans without a single ripple of protest. My first strategic move was a quiet one, executed under the guise of confusion. I told Darlene I needed to go to the bank. "There are some of your father's old accounts, I think," I sighed over the phone, letting my voice crack just so. "I'm so confused by all this paperwork. The statements just keep coming. Could you possibly drive me? I just don't think I should be behind the wheel right now." She agreed instantly, her voice oozing with dutiful concern. It fit perfectly into her narrative of the competent daughter managing her incompetent mother. In the car, she chattered on about the virtues of her basement. "No more worrying about the lawn or a leaky roof, Mom. You can just relax. I'll even do your laundry for you." Relax? Like a well-cared-for prisoner in a minimum security facility? "That's so thoughtful of you, dear," I murmured, looking out the window. At the bank, I played my part to the hilt. I told Darlene, "You wait here, honey." I patted her hand as she settled into a plush chair in the waiting area. "This might take a while. I'm so slow with these things." I didn't walk to the teller line. I walked directly to the frosted glass door of the bank manager, a kind, sharp woman named Susan Gable, whom I'd known for 15 years. "Michelle, it's so good to see you, though I am so deeply sorry for your loss," she said, coming around her desk to give me a brief, comforting hug. "Thank you, Susan," I replied, taking the seat she offered. "I appreciate that. I'm here because I need to check on a specific account, an old one. It's held under my maiden name, Michelle Parker." She nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard. I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety in my stomach. This was the first concrete step, the first test of my entire plan. The account was my secret weapon, my ace in the hole. It was an inheritance from my own mother, who had passed away 20 years ago. It hadn't been a large sum, but I had been disciplined. I'd invested it wisely, never touching the principal, letting it grow quietly in the background of our lives. It was my independence fund, a name Russell had jokingly given it. "Every woman needs a little independence," he had said with a wink. I never imagined how much I would truly need it. "And here we are," Mrs. Gable said, a small smile playing on her lips. "The Parker account. Everything is in perfect order. The balance is quite healthy, Michelle."
A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. I had seen the statements, of course, but seeing it confirmed, real, and accessible on her screen was different. The balance was just over $50,000. It wasn't a life-changing fortune, but it was more than enough. It was the key that would unlock my cage. "I'd like to arrange a wire transfer for the full amount," I said, my voice clear and steady, a stark contrast to the trembling woman my daughter believed was fumbling with paperwork in the lobby. "But not just yet. I will call you with the specific instructions in a few days." "Of course," she said, making a note. "Just let me know." As I walked out of her office, I felt a surge of adrenaline, a feeling of power I hadn't felt in months. This was real. My plan wasn't just a fantasy of rebellion, it was a viable, actionable strategy. On the drive home, with Darlene chattering on about what color she should paint the basement walls, I decided it was time to make another call. I needed to speak to my granddaughter, Kathleen. She was a bright, wonderful girl, a freshman at a good state school 3 hours away. She was the light of my life, the one pure, uncomplicated joy. I had been sending her $500 a month directly from my personal checking account to help with her expenses, books, food, the occasional night out with friends. It was a small thing, but it made me feel connected to her, a part of her new, exciting life. That evening, I dialed her number, my heart lifting at the thought of hearing her voice. "Grandma," she answered on the second ring, her voice a burst of youthful energy. "How are you doing? I was just thinking about you." "I'm getting by, sweetie. I just wanted to hear your voice. Is everything okay at school? Are your classes going well? You got the money for this month, right? It should have gone through on the 1st. There was a slight, almost imperceptible pause on her end. "Oh, yeah, thanks, Grandma. Actually, Mom called me last week. She said, well, she said you were having a tough time financially right now, with everything, and that I shouldn't bother you about the college fund money. She said she was going to cover it for a while. She sent it yesterday. It was so nice of her." The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. I gripped the phone, the plastic groaning under the pressure of my fingers. Darlene, my daughter. She hadn't just lied to me. She hadn't just lied about me. She had actively intercepted my love, my gift to my granddaughter, and wrapped it up and presented it as her own. She was methodically, cruelly erasing me from my own family's narrative, painting me as a destitute burden, while positioning herself as the generous, selfless savior. It was a new, breathtaking level of betrayal. It was more than just about money or a house. It was about my identity, my role as a mother and grandmother.
It was a theft of love itself. It was vile. "Oh," I managed to say, my voice dangerously calm, "a quiet lake before an earthquake." That was very thoughtful of her. "Yeah, she's really worried about you. She said you might have to move out of the house and that things were going to be tight for a while." "We're still figuring things out, sweetie," I said, my mind a storm of cold, precise fury. "Don't you worry your pretty head about a thing. You just focus on your studies. I love you very much." "Love you too, Grandma. Talk soon." I hung up the phone. The mask of the grieving widow, the part I had been playing so convincingly, fell away. In its place was a woman I barely recognized, a woman carved from ice and fire. They hadn't just insulted my intelligence or tried to steal my home. They had used my purest love, my love for my granddaughter, as a weapon in their campaign. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. There was no going back now. The next morning, I didn't call Darlene for a ride. I called a cab. My destination was a sleek, imposing office building downtown, the home of Abernathy Finchman Cole. David Abernathy had been our family lawyer for over 30 years. He had handled the purchase of this very house, the drafting of our wills, the creation of our first investment accounts. He was a link to my past, and he was about to become the architect of my future. He greeted me with a sad smile and a firm, dry handshake. He was a tall, stooped man in his late 60s, with kind eyes that had seen a lifetime of human folly. "Michelle, I was so sorry to hear about Russell. He was a good man, a very smart man." "He was," I said, taking the plush leather seat opposite his large mahogany desk. "And that's why I'm here, David. I need to know exactly where I stand." I laid it all out for him. The phone call from Donald, the manufactured budget from Darlene, their plan to relegate me to their basement. I told him everything, except for my independence fund. I was holding that card close to my chest for now. I needed to see the full layout of the board before I revealed my final move. He listened patiently, his fingertips steepled under his chin, his expression growing more grim with every word I spoke. When he finished, he was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Michelle, Russell was, as I said, a very smart man. He was also a very cautious one. About 5 years ago, not long after his diagnosis, he came to see me. He was worried. He saw the way Donald's latest business venture was struggling, the constant talk of needing more capital. He saw the way Darlene and her husband were living, the fancy cars, the expensive vacations. He knew their salary couldn't support that lifestyle. He was afraid they would see you and this house as a solution to their problems after he was gone." My breath caught in my throat. He knew. My practical, loving Russell. He had seen the cracks in our children's lives that I had chosen to ignore, to explain away as youthful ambition or modern living. "So we took some preemptive steps," Mr. Abernathy continued, leaning forward. "First, the house. The mortgage was paid off a decade ago, as you know. What you may not know is that 5 years ago, we filed a quitclaim deed. Russell signed his interest in the property to you. It is entirely 100% in your name alone. His name is not on the deed. Legally, they can't force you to sell it. They can't do a single thing." A single hot tear of gratitude, of overwhelming love for my husband rolled down my cheek. "Thank you, Russell. Thank you."
Second, his pension and your joint investments. The pension automatically transfers to you as the surviving spouse. The investment portfolio, we did something a little more creative. We restructured it. It's now held in an irrevocable living trust. You are the sole beneficiary and the sole trustee. You have complete and total control. They have no access and no legal claim to it, not now, not ever. It is protected from any and all creditors, including
should it come to that, their own. He slid a thick, leather-bound folder across the polished desk. This contains all the relevant documents. Your net worth, Michelle, is quite substantial. You are, in no uncertain terms, a wealthy woman. You could buy and sell both your children's houses for cash and not even notice it in your accounts. I opened the folder. The numbers, printed in crisp black ink on the asset summary, swam before my eyes. It was more than I had realized. We had always lived modestly, preferring to save and invest rather than spend. It had grown, silently and steadily, into a fortress. Russell's fortress, built to protect me from his own children. "There's one more thing," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice gentle but firm. "I took the liberty of doing a little public records search after you called to make the appointment. Donald's construction company is on the verge of bankruptcy. He has several large commercial loans coming due at the end of the quarter. He doesn't just want the money from the sale of your house, Michelle. He needs it. Desperately." That was it. The final ugly piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just callous greed. It was raw, animal desperation. He was willing to sacrifice his own mother's home and dignity to save his failing business. I closed the folder with a soft, decisive thud. I looked my old friend in the eye, and the fragile, grieving woman who had walked into his office was gone. In her place was someone else, someone with a spine of steel. My voice when I spoke was clear and steady. "David, I'm going to need your help. I have a plan, and I'm going to need you to draft a letter." For the next hour we worked. I told him about my independence fund and my ultimate destination. He didn't question my decision for a moment. He saw the resolve in my eyes. We made arrangements. We set up new accounts. We planned the wire transfer to a bank in Spain. And we drafted the letter. A letter that would be the final, devastating, and legally binding blow. When I left his office, the afternoon sun was bright. I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a pawn in their selfish game. I was the queen, quietly moving my pieces into place for a checkmate they would never see coming. My final act of preparation was the most personal and the most painful. That evening, I walked through the silent house, not as a woman saying goodbye to her home, but as an archivist closing a collection. I went into the attic, the air thick with the smell of dust and cedar, and into the back of the spare bedroom closet. I pulled out dusty, sealed boxes. Boxes I hadn't opened in 20 years. Inside were the carefully preserved relics of their childhoods. Donald's Little League trophies, tarnished with age. Darlene's first pair of ballet slippers, the pink satin worn through at the toes. A box of her dramatic teenage diaries filled with angst and secrets. Report cards with gold stars, clumsy finger paintings, awkward class photos. A lifetime of memories that they had left behind, memories I had lovingly curated and stored, believing that one day they would want them. I spent the entire night packing, not my things, but theirs. I found 2 large, sturdy shipping boxes. Into one, I carefully placed every single item belonging to Donald. Into the other, Darlene's. It wasn't an act of anger, not really. It was an act of severance, a symbolic return. They were so ruthlessly focused on my future, it was time they were confronted with the past they had so carelessly discarded. As I taped up the last box, the sun was beginning to streak the sky with pale pink. The next morning, I called a moving company, not to get a quote for packing up my house, but to arrange a special delivery. "I have 2 large boxes that need to be shipped," I told the dispatcher. "Where are they going, Mom?" I gave her their addresses, one in the suburbs, one in the city. "And please," I added, my voice firm, "I want to request immediate same-day delivery. No signature required. Just leave them on the doorstep." As I hung up, I took 2 small gift cards and wrote a short, simple note on each. For Donald, "These are the things you earned with your own effort. I was always so proud of you." For Darlene, "Memories are the most precious things we own. I hope you cherish these." The words were, on the surface, true, but in this new, poisoned context, they were laced with an irony so sharp it could cut glass. The packages were sent, the lawyer was ready, the bank was waiting for my call. The pieces were all in place. All that was left was my final move. I opened my laptop, the screen a bright rectangle in the dim morning light. I went to an airline website, my fingers steady on the keyboard.
I booked a one-way first-class ticket to Malaga, Spain, for the following day. My new life was waiting, just a click away. The day of my departure was a study of surrealism. The house, my home of 4 decades, felt like a museum after hours. It was vast and unnervingly quiet, each room echoing with the ghosts of 1,000 ordinary moments. My own luggage, 2 large suitcases and a single carry-on stood sentinel by the front door, a small, defiant army awaiting its marching orders. The rest of the house was pristine, untouched, a perfectly preserved stage set where the lead actors had decided to walk off mid-performance. My phone, which I'd plugged in for a final charge, buzzed incessantly on the kitchen counter. A frantic rhythm of calls and texts. Donald, Darlene, Lisa, Donald again. I ignored it. Their urgency was a distant noise, the frantic buzzing of angry wasps trapped in a jar. My own world was preternaturally calm, filled with a profound, almost serene sense of purpose. The taxi I'd booked arrived precisely at 2 p.m. As the driver, a young man with kind eyes, loaded my bags into the trunk, I allowed myself one last, lingering look. I didn't do a dramatic tour. I just stood in the doorway. I touched the worn brass of the doorknob, the frame where Russell and I had meticulously marked the children's heights with pencil lines each year. I ran my hand along the velvet of the living room sofa, the spot indented from countless evenings spent reading side by side. There was no sudden, cinematic flood of tears, no great wave of regret, just a quiet, bittersweet farewell. I was closing a book whose story I had loved, but whose final chapters had been a bitter disappointment. It was time, I knew, to start a new one. "Ma'am," the driver called gently from the curb, "traffic to the airport can be tricky. We should probably get going." I nodded, took a deep breath, and turned my back on the house. I walked down the path and got into the cab without looking back.
At the airport, I moved through the bustling crowds like a woman in a dream, insulated from the chaos by a bubble of my own making. I checked my bags, moved through the security line with practiced efficiency, and found my gate. I bought a bottle of water and a paperback novel I knew I wouldn't read. The relentless buzzing of my phone in my purse finally ceased as the battery died. Good. Let it die. Let them wonder. The flight was more than just a journey. It was a passage between worlds. As the plane climbed through a thick blanket of gray clouds, leaving the familiar sprawl of the city behind, I felt the physical weight of the last few weeks. The suffocating grief, the corrosive deception, the white-hot anger begin to lift from my shoulders. I was literally rising above it. Once we reached cruising altitude, I ordered a small bottle of champagne. The flight attendant raised an eyebrow slightly. A lone woman in her 60s, ordering champagne by herself on a Tuesday afternoon. I didn't care. I poured the bubbling liquid into the small plastic flute. I raised it in a silent toast. To Russell, for his love and his foresight. To myself, for my courage. And to the vast, unknown, and beautiful future. I landed in Malaga under a sky the color of a perfect robin's egg. The air that greeted me as I stepped off the plane was warm and soft, fragrant with the scent of salt and blooming flowers. It was a sensory shock, a world away from the damp, chilly autumn I had left behind. After navigating customs and collecting my bags, I found the taxi rank and gave the driver the address. An address I had looked at on a map 100 times, but now felt as foreign and mythical as Xanadu. The drive was a revelation. It took us up into the sun-drenched hills overlooking the impossibly blue Mediterranean, through winding roads lined with whitewashed villages, the famous Pueblos Blancos, and cascades of vibrant pink bougainvillea. Finally, the taxi slowed and pulled up to a simple, rustic wooden gate set in a low stone wall. "Aquí estamos, señora. Hidas amiso," the driver said, his voice a warm, gravelly baritone. "Here we are." I paid him, my hands trembling slightly as I counted out the euros. He helped me with my bags, setting them down on the dusty ground beside the gate. I stood for a long moment after he drove away, the only sound the chirping of cicadas and the distant sigh of the sea. This was it. The point of no return. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the gate open. The villa was even more beautiful than in the photos Russell had shown me. It was not large or ostentatious, but it was perfect. Whitewashed walls, a weathered red tiled roof, and a small tiled patio shaded by a gnarled old olive tree. The garden was a riot of color, with lemon trees, lavender bushes, and rosemary. It was clean and impeccably maintained, a testament to the property management company Russell had hired years ago. But it was also empty, impersonal. It was a house, a beautiful house, but it wasn't a home yet. As I stepped inside, the coolness of the terracotta-tiled floors a welcome relief from the afternoon sun. A sudden, unexpected wave of loneliness washed over me. It was so powerful it almost buckled my knees. It was a fleeting, terrifying thought that screamed in the silence of my mind. What in God's name have I done? I was 63 years old, a widow in a foreign country where I knew no one and barely spoke the language. I had acted with such strength and conviction, but was it courage or was it a fool's errand? I shook my head, physically trying to dislodge the fear. No, this was a test, the first test of my new life. I would not fail it. I spent the rest of the day in a flurry of determined activity, a one-woman army against the encroaching loneliness. I unpacked my suitcases, putting my clothes in the simple wooden closets, arranging my few framed photos on the mantelpiece above the small fireplace. I found the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to impose my own life, my own order, on the beautiful empty space. I began to turn this house into a home. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, a very different drama was reaching its climax. Donald and Darlene, armed with the fraudulent real estate papers from Lisa's cousin and brimming with self-righteous determination, drove to my house. They were on a mission, ready to deliver the final compassionate blow and get my signature on the sales agreement. They likely imagined me sitting in Russell's armchair, weeping, waiting for them to come and take control, to save me from myself. They walked up the familiar front path and stopped dead. On the porch, blocking the front door, were the 2 large brown cardboard boxes I had sent. Their names were written on them in my familiar looping cursive. Confused, they pushed the boxes aside and tried the front door. It was locked. They rang the bell, the sound echoing in the empty street. They peered through the front windows. The house was silent, still, and stubbornly, unnervingly, full of furniture. I can only imagine the conversation that followed, the creeping sense of unease, the confusion turning to irritation, then to genuine alarm. They would have called my phone again and again, their frustration mounting with each automated message that the user was unavailable. They would have called my best friend, Carol, who, bless her heart, had been prepped for this moment. "Oh, I haven't spoken to her since yesterday morning," she told them, her voice a perfect blend of vague concern. "I'm sure she's just resting. You know how tired she's been." Their panic must have escalated until Darlene, perhaps out of a morbid curiosity, finally tore open the box with her name on it. And there, nestled in tissue paper, staring up at her, were her first pair of worn satin belly slippers. That's when my new Spanish phone, now fully charged and resting on the patio table beside me, began to ring. It was an unknown international number, but I knew exactly who it was. They must have been in such a state that they'd borrowed a neighbor's phone. I let it ring 3 times, took a deep, calming breath, and swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice serene, the sound of the evening cicadas a gentle chorus in the background. "Mom!" Darlene's shriek was so high-pitched and frantic, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Where are you? What is going on? What are these boxes? The house is locked!" I took a slow sip of the fresh lemonade I'd made with lemons from my own garden. I could hear the sea breeze rustling the leaves of the olive tree above me. "I'm at home, dear," I said calmly. "You are not home," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "We are at the house. It's locked. What have you done?" "No, Darlene," I corrected her, my voice gentle but precise. "You are at my house in America. I'm at my home in Spain. Silence. A stunned, uncomprehending silence that was more satisfying than any shouting could ever be. I could picture her face, the slack-jawed disbelief, the dawning horror. Spain? She finally sputtered, the word a puff of air. You can't be in Spain. That's impossible.
Oh, but I am, I said, allowing a small, genuine smile to touch my lips. It's quite lovely. The sun is setting over the Mediterranean right now. It's all pink and orange. Your father and I bought this place years ago. It was always our retirement plan. Retirement plan? You can't afford to retire. Donald's voice now, rough and angry, snatching the phone from his sister. He was shouting, all pretense of concern gone. We saw the budget. We saw the numbers. You're broke. This was the moment. The culmination of all my planning. The checkmate. The budget you created, Donald? I asked, my voice dropping, losing its gentle tone and gaining an edge of pure, cold steel. The one where you conveniently forgot about the paid-off mortgage? The one where you fraudulently underestimated my investment income by about 70%? That budget. More silence. This time it was the heavy, suffocating silence of guilt, of being caught in a lie so profound it had become their reality. I am disappointed in you both, I continued, my voice cold and clear as a winter morning, more than you will ever know. You were so eager to sell my home, to throw me into a basement, all to bail out your failing business, Donald. And you, Darlene, stealing credit for the money I sent to your daughter, using my love for her as a tool in your deception? How could you? Mom, we were just worried, Darlene started, her voice now a pathetic, childish whimper. No, I cut her off, my tone sharp and final. You don't get to speak. You have forfeited that right. You only get to listen. The house in America is not for sale. In fact, I have already engaged the services of a property management company. It will be rented up starting next month, and the entirety of the rent, every single penny, will be deposited directly into a new, legally protected college fund for Kathleen, a fund that her mother cannot touch. I let that sink in for a beat. You should both be receiving a registered letter from my lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, in a day or two. It will explain the legal and financial realities of your situation in excruciating detail. Do not contact me again. I am blocking your numbers. Goodbye. And with that, I ended the call. I went into my phone settings and blocked their numbers and Lisa's for good measure. I sat on my patio, the phone resting on the table beside me, and I watched the last sliver of the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant, fiery strokes. I did not cry. I felt a profound, cleansing peace wash over me. The curtain had fallen. My old life was over. My new one had just begun. The first few days in Spain were a strange cocktail of exhilaration and a deep, resonant loneliness. The initial thrill of my victory, the sheer satisfaction of that final phone call, gave way to the quiet, stark reality of my situation. I had won my freedom, but I was now truly, utterly alone. I would wake up in the bright, sun-filled bedroom and for a terrifying moment, not know where I was. The silence of the villa, once a symbol of peace, now felt heavy, pressing in on me. I knew I couldn't just sit in my beautiful house and wait for life to happen. I had to go out and meet it halfway. I had to build a new world for myself from scratch. Remembering Russell's lifelong advice to always keep learning, to stay curious, I forced myself out of the house. I drove my small rental car into the nearby village, a charming labyrinth of cobbled streets and whitewashed walls. I found a small community center and scanned the bulletin board, a colorful collage of local events. My eyes landed on a flyer for a pottery class, Clases de Cerámica. It felt right. Something to do with my hands, something to create instead of just remembering.
something solid and real. On the first day of class, I was a bundle of nerves. The studio was a wonderfully chaotic space, filled with the earthy smell of wet clay and the cheerful chatter of women speaking rapid-fire Spanish. I was the oldest person there by at least 20 years, and very clearly the only American. I felt a pang of self-consciousness, a voice in my head whispering, "What are you doing here?" Then, a woman with fiery red hair piled messily on top of her head and a clay-smudged apron strode towards me, her smile wide and immediate. "Bienvenidos," she said, her voice a warm, booming sound that filled the studio. "Welcome. My name is Pilar." I tried to introduce myself in the rusty high school Spanish I had been practicing. "Me llamo Michelle. Yo soy de la América." She laughed, a wonderful, uninhibited sound. "Michelle, welcome. Don't you worry about the Spanish. My English is 50-50, she said, wabbling her hand back and forth. "We will make it work. The clay, it speaks its own language, yes?" And we did make it work. Pilar was a gifted and patient teacher. She stood behind me at the spinning wheel, her strong, capable hands guiding mine, showing me how to center the lump of clay, how to feel its balance, how to gently pull the walls upward. In the intense focus of the work, the rhythmic spinning of the wheel, the cool, wet slip of the clay through my fingers, I found a kind of meditation. The constant angry noise in my head, replaying conversations, the sting of betrayal, finally began to quiet. For the first time in months, I was purely in the present moment. At the end of the 2-hour class, as I was clumsily trying to wash the clay under my fingernails, Pilar tapped me on the shoulder. "You have good hands, Michelle," she said, her dark eyes appraising me. "A natural feel for the pressure. You live nearby?" I told her the name of my street, the one I had recited to the taxi driver. Her eyes lit up with genuine surprise and delight. "No, it is not possible. You are my neighbor. I live just 2 houses down the lane. I saw that someone had moved into the old Miller house. I cannot believe it is you." It was a coincidence so perfect, so utterly serendipitous, that it felt like a gift from the universe. Or maybe, I thought with a small, secret smile, it was a final winking gift from Russell. From that day on, Pilar became my first and truest friend in Spain. She refused to let me be lonely. She would appear at my gate in the morning holding 2 cups of strong coffee, insisting we drink them on my patio. She dragged me to the bustling weekly market, teaching me the Spanish names for vegetables and haggling fiercely on my behalf. She introduced me to her loud, loving, sprawling family, who welcomed me with open arms and kisses on both cheeks. She taught me how to make a proper tortilla española, her secret being a scandalous amount of olive oil. Through Pilar, my beautiful, empty house began to fill with life and laughter. It was no longer just the house, it was becoming my home. I was building a new family, one based not on duty, inheritance, or obligation, but on shared laughter, mutual respect, and a genuine affection that was as warm and bright as the Spanish sun. I was discovering that the strongest foundations are not the ones you are born into, but the ones you have the courage to build for yourself.
A few weeks after I had settled into this new rhythm, I received an email. I had been avoiding my inbox, but this one caught my eye. The subject line simply said, "Grandma?" It was from Kathleen. My heart did a nervous little flip. I had been worried sick about her, caught in the toxic fallout of her parents' lies and greed. I opened it immediately. Her email was short, hesitant, and filled with a pain that was palpable even through the screen. She said her mom and uncle were furious, that there had been a lot of yelling and slammed doors. She said she'd received the formal letter from Mr. Abernathy's office explaining the new trust that had been set up for her college fund. She said she was confused and hurt and wanted to hear my side of the story. She ended with a simple, heartbreaking question. "Can I please call you?" I replied instantly, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "Of course, sweetie. I am here. Call me anytime." The call came an hour later. Her voice was small and choked with tears. "Grandma?" Mom said. She said you abandoned the family. She said you took all of Dad's money and ran away. I took a deep, centering breath. This was perhaps the most important conversation of my new life. I knew I couldn't let anger or bitterness color my words. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't badmouth her parents, as tempting as it was. I simply, calmly, and factually told her the truth. I told her about her parents' plan to sell my home from under me. I told her about the fraudulent budget they had created to scare me. And then, as gently as I could, I told her about the money I had been sending her for school. "Kathleen, honey," I said softly, "for the past 6 months since you started college, I have sent you $500 on the first of every month. It was my gift to you. I have the bank records. Your mother told you she was paying for it. She wasn't. She was taking my gift and pretending it was her own." There was a long, ragged silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her soft, hitching sobs. "I knew it," she finally whispered, her voice thick with a dawning, painful understanding. "I knew something wasn't right. She was being so weird about money, telling me not to bother you about it, that you were too fragile. Oh, Grandma, I'm so sorry. I should have known." "You have nothing to be sorry for, my love," I said, my own eyes welling up with tears of relief and love for this wonderful girl. "You were a child caught in the middle of a very adult, very ugly situation. None of this is your fault." We talked for over an hour. I told her everything about Spain, about the villa, about my pottery class, and my new friend Pilar. I made sure she understood that I wasn't running away from something, but running towards something. A life of my own. A life of peace and dignity. By the end of the call, the sadness in her voice had been replaced by something else. Something I hadn't heard in a long time. Wonder. "It sounds amazing, Grandma," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It sounds like a dream. I wish I could see it." "I can," I said, an idea blooming in my mind, bright and beautiful. "Spring break is in a few weeks, isn't it? Why don't you come and visit? My treat. I'll buy the ticket today." And so she did. Seeing her walk through the arrivals gate at the Malaga airport, her face lighting up when she saw me, it was like watching the sun rise after a long, dark night. We hugged for what felt like an eternity, two survivors of the same shipwreck, finally finding each other on a safe and sunny shore. Kathleen fell head over heels in love with Spain. She loved the food, the language, the slower, more deliberate pace of life. I introduced her to Pilar, who immediately enveloped her in a bear hug and adopted her as another granddaughter. She spent hours in the pottery studio, her hands quickly becoming more skilled than mine, a look of pure, unadulterated joy on her face. One evening, we were sitting on the patio, sharing a bowl of olives, and watching the stars begin to prick the deep indigo sky. "Grandma," she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious, "I've been thinking a lot about what Mom and Uncle Donald did, about what I want to do with my life, not what they expect me to do." She took a deep breath, her young face determined in the twilight. "I don't want to go back after spring break. I've been talking to my advisor. I want to take a gap year. I want to stay here with you. I can work at Pilar's studio. She already offered me a job helping with the tourists. I can learn Spanish properly. And I don't know. I just want to figure things out. Figure myself out, away from all their drama and expectations." I looked at my beautiful, brave granddaughter. She had her father's dark eyes, but she had Russell's spirit, his courage and his integrity. She was choosing her own path, not the one that had been laid out for her. She was choosing truth over lies, love over obligation. She was breaking the cycle. Tears streamed down my face,
but for the first time in a very long time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I would love that more than anything in the world, Kathleen, I whispered. And that was my true victory. It wasn't the house, it wasn't the money, it wasn't the look of stunned defeat I imagined on my children's faces. It was this. It was sitting under a sky full of unfamiliar stars with my granddaughter, knowing the legacy of love, strength, and integrity that Russell and I tried to build would continue. It had skipped a generation, but it would live on, strong and true, in her.
My life now is simple, and it is beautiful. Kathleen and I have our routines. We have strong coffee on the patio in the morning light. We work at the studio, our hands shaping wet clay into new, beautiful forms. In the evenings, we cook together, or walk down to the sea, or simply sit and read in comfortable silence. I have started writing my memoirs, not for publication, but for myself and for Kathleen. A way to reclaim my own story, to own my own truth. I still get the occasional angry, rambling email from Donald or Darlene, demands for money, bitter accusations, clumsy attempts at guilt-tripping. I delete them without reading past the first line. They are ghosts from another life, angry specters from a world that no longer belongs to me. Their choices led them to their path. My choices led me to mine. I spent a lifetime building a home for my family, and I don't regret a single moment of it. But I learned that the most important home you can ever build is the one inside yourself, a place of strength, dignity, and peace that no one can ever take away from you. Russell didn't just leave me an inheritance of money and property. He left me a key, the key to my own independence, the permission to unlock the door to my own life, a life I am finally, truly living. I learned that love doesn't mean erasing yourself, and that forgiveness, while a virtue, has its limits. That limit is your own self-worth. Sometimes the most powerful act of love, especially self-love, is having the courage to walk away, to leave the darkness behind, and to step into your own glorious sunlight. Thank you all for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. This journey has taught me so much, and I hope it offers a little bit of strength, a little bit of hope to anyone out there who might be feeling unseen, unappreciated, or taken for granted. Now, I turn it over to you. Does any part of this story resonate with you? Have you ever felt like your sacrifices went unnoticed? Please share your thoughts in your own stories in the comments below. Let's listen to each other, support each other, and empower one another.